So friends, where exactly is the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, today? He is currently in France, accompanied by Yermak, who serves as the head of the office of the president. Today, an official meeting took place with Emmanuel Macron, who, even without further issues, already has plenty of problems within his own domestic political sphere. You are well aware of all this, but what was the main topic of discussion? Volodymyr Zelensky supposedly traveled to France with the purpose of requesting weapons and Mirage jets. And indeed, today a significant 10-year agreement was officially signed. Ukraine will get these planes for a price, and we can clearly see that this entire situation isn't going to be resolved instantly. That is the ultimate conclusion, a decade-long understanding for Mirage jets. This is a protracted affair. These aren't aircraft you receive today for tomorrow or even by the next day. No, this will all be stretched out once again over 10 years. Why has this situation unfolded? Ukraine currently finds itself in a considerably challenging military predicament, as you're aware, given the increasingly alarming scenario that is developing on the front lines, particularly in specific areas. But we see the weakness of our partners, both the United States and the European Union, in delivering weapons and resolving the issue of funding. Regarding the resolution of the money issue, it's also quite intriguing because I am uncertain if this is a mere coincidence or not, but precisely today the European Commission and specifically its president Ursula von der Leyen made a significant statement declaring that Ukraine must expeditiously secure 137 billion euros by April 2026 should the ongoing conflict persist. That's 137 billion euros. So what are we to do with it? It remains unclear what actions are being taken concerning this, particularly given the absolute lack of progress on the matter of frozen Russian assets. And consequently, the political elites of Europe have recently been giving quite serious consideration to both Fico and Orbán. This is especially true given the corruption scandal that we're currently referring to informally as Mindichgate. That is precisely why, circling back to Emmanuel Macron, I must emphasize that this particular matter is, at this very moment, unequivocally not a subject for public disclosure. However, I can assure you that Volodymyr Zelensky, Yermak, and Macron certainly addressed this significant topic, and they most certainly discussed this. So the question is why? This is because it's a widely discussed topic that everyone is talking about. Well, consider this. Another statement has emerged in recent days. Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland and a steadfast friend of Ukraine, is essentially conveying these ideas. He explicitly states, "I cautioned Volodymyr Zelensky at the outset of his presidency that Russia and pro-Russian factions across Europe would actively promote a narrative emphasizing profound corruption within Ukraine. I urged him to carefully watch for any corruption around him." The capacity to steer clear of even the slightest hint of scandal is absolutely critical for safeguarding President Zelensky's reputation. It will become significantly more challenging to persuade our international partners to continue supporting Ukraine if these instances of corruption persistently emerge. Right now, it seems the Ukrainian leadership is serious about Nevertheless, a significant blow has already been dealt, which unfortunately means that the repercussions and the ultimate cost will undoubtedly be quite substantial. He's specifically referring to the image of the current authorities within Ukraine. And what high price is Donald Tusk talking about now? Is he talking about those 137 billion? Or is he discussing consequences for Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership? How can the situation be saved, especially against this backdrop? Certainly, 2 Patriot missiles from the Greeks, if indeed they materialize, that's positive. A 10-year contract for Mirage jets, if it comes to fruition, all these things are beneficial. However, we must engage in serious combat, and that needs to happen without delay starting today. The Financial Times is featuring a headline that reads, "Bags of cash." And as you can see, bags of cash and gold toilets. It points to destabilization occurring at a truly critical juncture in the ongoing war. Zelensky is too slow. That's the main point of their reaction. However, it is necessary to acknowledge the strategy of him initiating the attack himself. After virtually 4 days of silence leading up to last Thursday when nothing transpired and Volodymyr Zelensky was not heard from, this was later explained by the president's office as a profoundly serious situation stemming from what's unfolding on the front lines and consequently Volodymyr Zelensky's complete dissociation from any Mindichgate affairs or companies. Precisely. However, this response was not solely sought by Ukrainian society, as is evident, but was also specifically required by the community of Ukraine's partners. And so to avoid publications like this, decisive action was needed. Currently, the authors of this Financial Times piece accuse Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, of being quite slow. And here we need to find an explanation for what to do with this next. Ukrainian Telegram channels are also abreast of the situation. I must tell you, especially those quite, shall we say, aligned with the president's office, are reporting the following. Concerning the Timur Mindich affair, it's rather telling that the scriptwriters never quite managed to seamlessly weave Andriy Yermak into the narrative, that is, into this entire Mindichgate saga. But the head of the president's office should remain vigilant. The Russians and the remnants of the OPZZH party will likely try to artificially link him to this story to weaken Ukraine's negotiations and strike at the president. And I realize that pits are being dug there now. I'm simply attempting to view the situation objectively. What I think doesn't matter. I'm just explaining what's occurring at this very moment. It appears to me that a trap is being set for everyone in the president's office. This particularly applies to Andriy Yermak and indeed extends to President Volodymyr Zelensky himself. There are only two paths. Either grab a shovel and dig identical pitfalls for your adversaries, or endeavor to navigate this predicament in such a way that it signifies not the start of an ultimate downfall, but rather the genesis of the eradication of corruption in Ukraine, at least concerning the magnitude currently highlighted by anti-corruption bodies. And the key thing in posts like this, it's a very, very telling piece on any Telegram channel, is this. Weaken Ukraine's negotiations and strike at the president. Take strike at the president out of the equation, and what's left is weaken Ukraine's negotiations. This is the current narrative gaining momentum, and I'm demonstrating that both. And then there's Donald Tusk. But even more concerningly, we have the highly alarming situation involving Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Salvini. And he's uttering things that perfectly align with this developing paradigm, which is actively expanding right before our very eyes. Listen, Salvini states, "It truly appears to me that corruption scandals are constantly surfacing, implicating the Ukrainian government and its officials. Therefore, my wish is that the funds contributed by Italian workers and pensioners are not utilized to sustain or perpetuate additional corruption." The quote continues, and it gets more intriguing. Sending weapons won't solve this. It seems to me that recent occurrences, especially given Russian troop advancements, convey to us. To whom exactly does us refer? For Italians, well, probably. That it's in everyone's best interest, and primarily Ukraine's, to halt the war, or rather to bring the war to an end. Understand? A staggering 137 billion euros, when weighed against the widespread issue of corruption, almost undeniably tips the scales of public opinion, strongly aligning with Salvini's viewpoint on this complex matter. And it's Italy we're talking about, Giorgia Meloni. Zelensky's staunchest ally, who shut everyone down in the Italian parliament, declaring that ending the war depended solely on Putin and that we must provide assistance. Now Italy's perspective has shifted to align with this view. And who is really driving this point home? If it's not Timur Mindich, then who exactly is using Timur Mindich as a scapegoat or a tool? And everyone is demanding answers. What exactly is happening now? And will Ukraine be forced to make concessions to the Russian Federation under immense pressure, simply because someone failed to effectively close the floodgates on this rampant flow of gold toilets in a timely manner? Let's consider the possible demands from our partners. Friends, this is very serious. The international press is also writing about these options. Something has to be cleaned up. I mean, it's clear that doing nothing is no longer an option. Some areas need to be cleaned up, some individuals dismissed. They've started with Halushchenko, Hrinchuk, auditing Ukroboronprom, Energoatom, and similar entities. But all these measures are distinctly inadequate. Well, in a way, yes. A complete reset, a total one. A complete reset that really signifies, state-owned enterprises absolutely must be led by different individuals. And a new coalition will likely need to be formed in parliament. Indeed, this represents a complete governmental reset, yet Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, remarkably succeeds in retaining control over the most crucial appointments and offices. And Yermak, if you're wondering, remains head of the office of the president in this second scenario. I think the president's office and Volodymyr Zelensky are leaning towards this option right now. And this unequivocally shows that Andriy Yermak is presently with Volodymyr Zelensky, not with Sviridhenko, who incidentally was absent from today's TSK hearing, where she was expected to address the corruption scandal. And with Yermak, you also have Greece and Paris represented, respectively. Well, and the third alternative, which is quite challenging to grasp how they might gravitate towards, involves a complete and total overhaul of everything. This is precisely what Volodymyr Zelensky's detractors within Ukraine are vehemently advocating and currently demanding. You've heard it, a government of national unity, a fresh new coalition setup. Sviridhenko's government would step down, Yermak would be dismissed and removed, and so on and so forth. All of these proposals have been floated. There won't be 5 or 6 managers. Instead, we'll only have Volodymyr Zelensky as a ceremonial general. And all other matters are no longer subject to his influence and control. And so, we are advancing towards the resolution of this conflict along with the seemingly endless narrative concerning financial aid from the EU. This isn't a viable position. I understand that this third option is very much unlikely to occur. Consequently, the second approach involves a reset, albeit with the partial preservation of certain influences that can still be maintained, preserved. And this indeed is a very interesting approach, specifically within the context of Plan A, B, and C, or rather Plan B. Mike Pompeo, and I should remind you that he's the ex-former United States Secretary of State, has now, my friends, entered into the supervisory board of the Firepoint enterprise. This is a company with known connections to Timur Mindich through several of its managers, a linkage that has certainly drawn attention and raised questions. So what exactly could be the full implications of all of this? Mike Pompeo, a figure of global renown, is obviously intended to significantly reinforce trust in the Ukrainian defense industry, leveraging his prominent international standing and reputation. Because I'll remind you, the NABU and SAP announced a story detailing the influence of specific individuals who are not in official government positions on high-ranking officials within the Ukrainian defense industry. And whether this explosion will be even bigger than the first series concerning the energy sector, nobody knows. So they're clearly hedging their bets. Pompeo joins the board. This also applies to trust, as well as the significant political and diplomatic dividends resulting from the ongoing successful negotiations regarding the establishment of a Firepoint manufacturing facility in Denmark. In this way, right up to the very last moment, everything is being done to ensure that the specific path that was initially charted, then established, and is now quite clearly being adhered to by the Ukrainian authorities. And I'm not suggesting that this approach is incorrect, is indeed still being pursued. Well, we will just have to see how it all unfolds. The situation will become clear once Volodymyr Zelensky concludes his international tour and returns. That's my perspective.